Well, good afternoon, friends, and welcome to another edition of Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health. Glad to be back with you here today, talking Syracuse football. And we've got the Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page turned on as well, because, hey, it's basketball season, right? 2 exhibition games in the books. The Orange start the regular season Monday against Lehigh. So, as the expression goes, basketball has entered the chat. Why, yes, it certainly has. Great to be back here with you. We do this every Thursday, right around noon Eastern time. But if you do miss the show live, replay certainly available to you on Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube. We put a post up on syracuse.com. We'll fire it off on our social media channels, automatically embeds here on Facebook if you're watching there. So plenty of chances to catch up on the replay if you miss it live. But if you do miss it live, you don't get to comment. You don't get to ask questions. You don't get to hop in there and participate in the show. So come by. We're here live Thursdays, noonish Eastern time. So come by. It's a thing. Let's start with football. We've got Syracuse and Pittsburgh this week. And then, as mentioned, we'll offer some what I think I learned from Syracuse basketball exhibition play. It's taken a bit with a grain of salt. Certainly it's exhibition play. And, you know, Jim Boeheim's playing around with the rotations and the lineups here. But this is an interesting team that's got to use every minute it can of exhibition play to see what it is before it all starts for real against Lehigh on Monday. So we'll get to some basketball conversation. Feel free to jump in on either topic in the comments as we go here, guys. Let's start with football. Let's start with who should start a quarterback for Syracuse against Pittsburgh, and that is Carlos Del Rio Wilson. After what I saw from Garrett Schrader last week, I just don't see, I'm not Dr. Axe, I just play one here on the internet, but I don't see how he could be healthy enough to go out there and be as effective as Garrett Schrader can be. Now, I want to make this clear, not a permanent change here. I agree with Dino Babers. When Garrett Schrader is healthy, Garrett Schrader is the quarterback of this team. That, however, is a big if. He's not healthy right now. And the best attribute that he brings to the field is, oh, thank you, Jay. Appreciate you saying that. Was on the ACC network the other day with Mark Packer and the crew. Always great to go on ACC PM. Appreciate you saying that, Jay. Look, Garrett Schrader's best attribute is his mobility. His mobility in terms of taking off and running when necessary and throwing on the run. He was nowhere near that last week, and I fail to see how 1 week gets him back there. This is why you have a backup quarterback. This is why you develop a backup quarterback. And I think Carlos Del Rio Wilson showed that he can ball, that he can hold down the fort until Garrett is healthy. This is a bruising, physical Pittsburgh defense. Pat Narduzzi, I know, would come up with a great game plan for Carlos Del Rio Wilson or Garrett Schrader. But I think in this case, you're better off starting Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Now, I'm not at practice. I don't see how better Schrader is this week. But the fact that it was left open to question, that's certainly gamesmanship on Dino Babers' part. But he said it himself. When Schrader's healthy, he's the quarterback. So why even do the gamesmanship? Why even keep it a mystery? Why even keep it as much under wraps through the week as long as you possibly can? I would imagine we're not going to find out until right before kickoff who the quarterback is. So if that's the case, that tells me Schrader's not healthy and Schrader's not up to his standards and not up to their standards. And frankly, you know, Garrett's got to ask what's best for the team. I was talking with Matthew Bergeron a little earlier this week. You'll see that Q&A up on Friday on syracuse.com, so make sure you check that out. And you know, he was saying they didn't even know who the quarterback was going to be until later in the week, and was saying that Garrett always does what's best for the team. So I think while I admire Garrett Schrader's competitiveness, I think a lot of you admire his competitiveness. He'll take on defenders. He's somebody who's got that competitive drive, and you need that kind of, you know, you're tilting the line between, you know, arrogance and confidence. A quarterback needs that, and I like that. But you have to be smart. If you cannot help the team with your best attribute, then you shouldn't be out there. And look, this is what Syracuse has had to do over the last decade. I wrote about it in the preseason. I've talked about it a lot here and other places, the radio, Twitter, whatever you want to do. My colleague, Emily Leiker, pardon me, wrote a great story about this today on syracuse.com. Look, the backup plays at Syracuse. It's that simple. No starting quarterback has gone wire to wire for Syracuse football since Ryan Nassib 10 years ago in 2012. And that 8-5 season Syracuse had capped with a pinstripe bowl win. The backup plays either by injury or by coach's choice. And nobody knows that better than Garrett Schrader, because last year, Schrader comes in for Tommy DeVito, and that was a performance-based decision. That was not based on injury, right? So, look, based on everything I've been able to see to this point, and I don't get to go to practice, and of course, they're keeping this as close to the vest as they can, I would go with Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Go from there, get Schrader healthy for the stretch run. We know this team's going to a bowl game. We know that there's certain things on the line, which I can understand why you would want Schrader out there if he's at his best. But that is a big, big if. If he's at his best. I don't feel like he's at his best right now. So put out the healthier quarterback. I love what I saw from Carlos Del Rio Wilson last week. I think the kid's got some moxie. He's big. He's got a big arm. Some players we talked to this week have commented that the ball comes off his hand faster. He's got more velocity on his throws than Garrett Schrader. That's not, really an insult per se. It's just different. Schrader throws a softer ball. Carlos Del Rio Wilson's just got more zip on the football. I think he brings a lot of the same attributes to the table that Schrader does. He's certainly mobile and can do a lot of those things that Schrader can do. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's ready to be this team's quarterback right now. He's still got a lot to learn. I mean, this guy transferred in May, but I think he held his own against a good Notre Dame team. Now, the advantage that Pat Narduzzi has that Marcus Freeman did not last week is now you got film of Carlos Del Rio Wilson, a whole half of film, and you can kind of break down those tendencies, right? So eventually that advantage goes away. The backup quarterback will typically have an advantage if there's not a lot of film on him. But I think in this circumstance, you start Carlos Del Rio Wilson, put him out there, and then see where Garrett Schrader is at for the stretch run with Florida State, Wake Forest, and Boston College still to come for the Orange. And starting with this Pitt game on Saturday, 3 of the last 4 on the road for the Orange. So keep that in mind too. As Jay notes here, Syracuse can't stop Pitt's run. Our quarterback will not make a difference. You make a great point, Jay, and we'll go right to that. This is a fun name to say, by the way, and he's one of the best running backs, not only in the ACC, but in the country. Izzy Abanikanda. Now, Syracuse could not stop Will Shipley and Clemson. They couldn't stop the double-headed monster that Notre Dame brought to the carrier. I did it in the JMA Wireless Dome last week. Still getting used to that. Syracuse's defense is missing a big element. If you guys didn't say, I'm sure most of you did, but Garrett Williams is out for the year with an ACL injury. And there's some bodies starting to drop on that defense. There's some injuries starting to pile up. The last 2 weeks, that Syracuse defense just got gashed by the Clemson and the Notre Dame running games. That mob defense certainly didn't show up to its capability there. Pittsburgh brings Izzy Abanikanda in, who's got 1,086 yards, 16 touchdowns, which leads the country, and he's the third leading rusher in the nation. As a matter of fact, what Izzy is doing this year reminds me a lot of what Sean Tucker did last year. So let's go through the matchups here because Syracuse, one way or the other, has got to break a 2-game losing streak in this game. Quarterback, it depends on who plays for Syracuse, but Kaidon Slovis has really struggled for Pitt. He has not been the quarterback they need. So I would almost give the edge to Syracuse, if not call it a draw. I would give the edge at running back to Pitt. Yeah, sounds like blasphemy, right? But Sean Tucker is just getting back to form. I think he looked better last week. He's not healthy. I was watching some highlights of Tucker from last season this week, and he just doesn't have the same burst this year. He's clearly just starting to get back to normal, just starting to get back to that speed when he gets to that second tier. When you watch that guy last year, it was actually a preview of the Pitt game where I was watching some highlights. He was just flying down the field. Not quite there yet this year, but maybe he's starting to get back there. So I would give Izzy the edge there, but that's close. They're similar to Syracuse at the wide receiver position, and they have one guy in Jared Wayne who's got 572 yards. He's 4th in the ACC. He had a huge game against North Carolina last week. That's really been the guy. Aronde Gatson, of course, has been that for Syracuse. I would give the Orange the edge on the offensive line. On the defensive side of the ball, I would probably give the edge to Pitt right now just because they're healthier. They've got some terrific players on that side of the ball that are nominated for all kinds of defensive awards. Servassier Dennis right up there as one of the best linebackers in the country with Mikel Jones, the Syracuse native, the CBA grad. Interesting to note here, guys, Kalijah Cansey, who is one of the best defensive tackles in the ACC. Remember, he got called for targeting last week. He's got to sit the first half. So Syracuse, particularly with Tucker running the football, has got to take advantage of that in the first half of this game in Pittsburgh. They've got a great cornerback They're just a little healthier than Syracuse, but here's the thing. They got torched the last couple of weeks, particularly in the fourth quarter. Pitt was outscored 38-0 in the fourth quarter alone. This is a team that is 4-4. They have not lived up to expectation yet, gave the number one team in the college football rankings, Tennessee, their toughest game this year. Pitt opened the season with that wild game against West Virginia, but they've been fading the past couple of weeks. I feel like this Syracuse defense can get to Slovis and cause some takeaways, even with Garrett Williams off the field. I still think there's some players capable of doing that. Oh, listen to Marty. Watching from Florida Ice, poolside. I'll tell you what, it's nice here in central New York, Marty. Going to be about 70 today. Going to be 70 tomorrow, 75 on Saturday. So we get to hit that little white ball around a little bit more up here than we thought into November, into these days of fall where typically most of the leaves are off the trees and you're getting the long sleeve shirts out and the sweaters. But we're enjoying some Florida-like weather up here, Marty, but I hope you're enjoying the poolside down there. All the pools are closed up here, so we don't have that. We certainly don't have that. So my prediction in syracuse.com today, Pitt going down to the Orange 28-24. I feel like this is going to be a grind of a football game. I think Syracuse squeaks one out here against Pittsburgh, but I think all those things should be noted. Their failures in the fourth quarter, but man, you have got to find a way to slow down Izzy Abanikanda because he could just take the game himself, the way that Syracuse has struggled against the run the last 2 weeks. But Pitt certainly has its flaws that the Orange has to take advantage of. What happens at quarterback will be fascinating. But I do think the Orange bounce back and get the 7-2 after a couple of losses to teams they were overmatched against. They are not overmatched in this game. I feel like it's, if anything, it's an even matchup against Pittsburgh on Saturday. A little agua here. And that will allow us to transition to basketball. Keep putting your football thoughts in the comments, certainly, but exhibition plays weird. Jim Boeheim's certainly going to tinker with the lineup. There were times when they played Southern New Hampshire the other night where it was basically like hockey lines. You had 4 or 5 guys coming in at once. But here's a few things I took away from exhibition play, and you guys share what you took away from exhibition play. The first thing is Jesse Edwards is the most important player on this team. I don't think there's any question about that. When he's anchoring the middle defensively, in the man or the zone, a lot of man-to-man defense in exhibition play, so something to note there. When the offense flows through Jesse, this team's at its best. Jim Boeheim was talking the other day about, some things that Jesse's doing on offense. He wants to take some more jump shots as opposed to attacking the backboard and taking those high percentage shots. Jesse can hit those jump shots. Obviously, it's better when he's closer to the basket. Got into foul trouble again in those exhibition games, so something to keep an eye on there. Peter Carey and Syracuse's transfer center, I don't think quite up to par yet to step in for big minutes for Jesse Edwards. But as Alan Griffin said this week in a story that Mike Waters wrote, those guys better be ready because there's just going to be an inevitable time when Jesse's going to be in foul trouble to the point where those backups are going to have to come in. All right. I think, though, 1A or a close second in terms of importance on this team is Symir Torrance. And here's why. Judah Mintz is an exciting player. Judah Mintz can get to the basket. Jim Boeheim has over and over said and put his confidence in the type of player that Judah Mintz can be. But, man, that kid's going to make some mistakes, right? As a freshman, certainly to be expected. Symir can come in, settle things down, run the point. He's a terrific defender. Symir and Malik Brown, who we got to look at, are terrific defenders on this team. He hit a couple of threes in exhibition play. I'm not expecting much from him in that department, but at least he's shown he's worked on his shot. He can hit that shot when he's open. And that's a thing that this team's going to need. We know Joe Girard can hit threes, but who are the other 3-point shooters on this team? It looks like Justin Taylor is in that kind of Buddy Boeheim realm, but he's got to go out there and prove it. That's an interesting position, by the way. The guys that could play the three, is it Chris Bell? Is it Quadir Copeland? Is it Justin Taylor? It's going to be an interesting rotation at that position. Quadir and Justin can certainly play the two if you need them at times, but I mean, Joe's the solid two on this team, so that will just be in certain circumstances at this point. But Jim Boeheim's going to need his veteran guy in Symir Torrance to come in and just kind of settle things down. But he's also talked repeatedly, Boeheim now, in preseason, even the other night after the Southern New Hampshire game, about Judah Mintz. They like what he can do offensively. They feel like he can run the point, but seems to be more of an offensive-minded point guard, whereas Rob notes here, Symir is a facilitator. He's getting better at attacking the basket. He's been around the block a few times. Judah Mintz is going to have to learn trial by fire, right? Make some mistakes, figure out where to distribute, how to do it. I think that Joe and Symir are more in sync with Jesse Edwards right now. That's something that Judah's going to have to figure out, the best times to drive and take people to the hoop, which he can do, versus get the ball to Jesse, lay back, be a distributor. It's something you learn on the fly. It's hard to do. Short of Tyler Ennis in 2014, which was Syracuse's first year in the ACC, you just don't see this. You just don't see a guy come in and just take to the position immediately. So I am as curious as anybody how that goes, right? Couple other things. I mentioned it. Man-to-man is going to be an option. It's not going to be the defense. When Syracuse really got down to it against Southern New Hampshire, they were terrific in the first half. They blew their doors off. The Penmen, as they are called, in New Hampshire. Second half was kind of a disaster. Southern New Hampshire outscored Syracuse. They out-rebounded Syracuse. They actually made that interesting. And when Syracuse had to lock it down and ensure victory, they went into the zone. You went back to your comfort zone, no pun intended there. So I think it makes sense to play man-to-man. This team has built certain lineups better in man-to-man. So this is not a myth. This is not one of those, urban legends that I once heard a tale of how Syracuse basketball played man-to-man defense. Oh, son, sit down and let me tell you a tale. No, that is going to happen this year. How much it happens, I don't know. I don't know how to put a percentage on it, but it was interesting to hear Jim Boeheim say the other night at his press conference, he is setting the precedent, like, don't ask me why I played certain defenses in certain times, which, can I just say, is a little ridiculous, because for reporters to say, why did you play a defense at this time? It's not always a criticism. As a matter of fact, most of the people in that room, it wouldn't be a criticism. It might be a criticism coming from somebody like me who's in the opinion world. But if, I don't want to speak for anybody here, but if you have like a Mike Waters or a Donna DeToda or a beat reporter asking that question, it's a literal why. It's not a criticism of why. It's just, you're the one person in the building that made that call. What were you thinking in that moment? Right. So I think Jim is going to already get a little sensitive about this, but he's got to understand, we haven't seen this. They have not played man-to-man defense since 2009, right? They lost to Lemoyne. It disappears forever, right? Short of the press, when they go into the press. Now that they're going to incorporate it for the first time since 2009, Jim, that's kind of a big deal. And people are going to wonder why you used the man-to-man in this set or the zone in that set, as opposed to playing zone for pretty much 40 minutes a game, short of pressing, as we mentioned. So I think Jim's got to lighten up on that a little bit. A question of why is not always a criticism. It's a literal why. And, Jim was saying the other night at the press conference, we go back 50 years. We kind of know what we're doing here. Yeah, but you haven't done this in over a decade. That's significant. So it'll be curious to see when they do it, but it doesn't seem like we're going to get a lot of insight into how they do it and why they do it, because Jim just doesn't seem to be in the mood to do that. I will say this, though. Jim offered a ton of insight at that press conference the other night. I've always said it. The best show in town is the Jim Boeheim press conference. And not just because he'll get a little surly sometimes and attack reporters. So I just brought up the comment about don't ask me about zone versus man-to-man. But he also will give you some really good insight and what he's thinking about certain players and where certain players are at. And it's always worth it to watch it start to finish, right? It's always up on YouTube shortly after he's done. I make a point to watch every press conference because I don't get to go to Jim Boeheim's press conferences as often as I used to, because I'm doing a post-game show, which, good plug, by the way, will be back. Now, you guys know, but in case you don't, we do post-game shows for football on these same channels, right? So if you're watching on the basketball channel right now, we'll be back. Now, we won't be doing every non-conference game. We're going to pick select non-conference games, some of the bigger games. We're going to be here Monday night doing a post-game show, and then we'll pick some of the more significant non-conference games but we'll be here for every ACC game doing post game. So I don't get to go to Jim Boeheim's press conference because I'm here with you doing this post game show, and I love doing it, right? So I always make a point later to watch the press conference because you'll learn a lot. And if anything, it's entertaining, right? When he gets a little snippy with some reporters. But I think the other night he offered a ton of insight, particularly on Judah Mintz. I am going to be really curious to see how long Jim Boeheim is patient with Judah Mintz because he has just showered praise on this kid through the preseason. He's the point guard. I mean, he's the guy, right? There's a lot of guards on this team, but there's only one point guard, and it's Judah Mintz. We mentioned Symir Torrance, right? But I don't think we're going to see a point of the season where Symir is the primary point guard. You know, they have a lot of faith in what Judah Mintz can do. Now we got to see it for real, or as the kids would say, for reals on the court. So that's exciting. Basketball's in the air. Shout out to the women's basketball team. They start, we're talking here Thursday afternoon. Their first and only exhibition game is tonight at the JMA Wireless Dome against Lemoyne. Let's not have a repeat of 2009, right? And boy, what a fascinating team that Felicia Leggett-Jack is bringing to the table. A lot of new faces. Tisha Hyman is their main returning player from a year ago, but you got Daisha Fair and Georgia Woolley, and boy, a whole lot of new faces. Kira Wood that we're going to get to know. She's got 9 guards on that team. Now, I talked to Felicia the other day. We talked to Felicia weekly on the radio, and which, by the way, is like, man, you don't need an afternoon caffeine jolt. Just put Felicia on the radio, and whammo, you're good for the rest of the day. She just brings the energy to every conversation she has. But I brought that up to her the other day. I said, you have 9 guards and 5 forwards on this team. You don't have anybody listed as center. How do you look at that from a position standpoint about how you're going to roll out the lineup? It's just, we don't look at it as positions. We're just going to put players out there, right? Ton of guards on this team. They're going to move fast. They're going to emphasize threes. There are some things that are going to be similar to how things were under Quentin Hillsman. Certainly not the way he ran the team. I mean, Felicia Leggett-Jack is a breath of fresh air in that department. I don't think we need to relitigate everything that happened with Coach Q, but obviously we found out just what a toxic situation it was and how he coached that team. Could not be more opposite than that with Felicia. But now we got to see it on the court, right? Felicia's done an excellent job in the offseason, doing interviews, doing PR, doing appearances. They did the event in Rochester a couple of weeks back. And boy, every time you're in the same room or watch her at an interview, or just if you've been at an event with her, it's just hard not to believe that she could bring this program back to where it needs to be. And that'll be my closing thought here this week, guys, because here you have 2 basketball situations. They have the same goal, right? Shameless plug. I wrote a column about this on syracuse.com, so I hope you can read that. It'll also be in our big Syracuse basketball preview in the Post Standard. Make sure you guys pick up that. I know that Mike Waters, Donna DeToda, yours truly, Dennis Nett. I'm probably leaving out Connor Pignatello is going to be covering women's basketball for us this year. I apologize if I'm leaving a name or two out. The people behind the scenes, our friend Nate Mink, Jackie Doman, and shout out to everybody that put the basketball preview together. That is coming out soon. You guys will definitely want to pick that up. Some of those articles are starting to appear on syracuse.com as well. But point being, my column was about how Jim and Felicia have the same stated goal, right? Get back to the NCAA tournament. But the scenarios couldn't be more different. Jim is a mechanical fix, right? They had their first losing season under Boeheim last year. You just got to find the right pieces on the court. Felicia has to change a whole culture while also getting a basketball team in line and back to where they proved they could be year in and year out, an NCAA tournament team. So it's going to be fascinating to see it play out. It's November. It's a busy time of year in sports. And it's a great time of year in sports. And we love being here with you weekly here on Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health. So just a reminder, we're here Thursdays at noon, and we're going to turn on the basketball page pretty much every week now as they are back in the mold here. So the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page, make sure you like that. If you're watching the show right now, you've already done that. So good on you. Syracuse Orange Basketball on Facebook. Syracuse Orange Sports on syracuse.com. Our YouTube page. Like all those things so you can watch the show live. But again, if you miss it live, the YouTube clip always available to you. We put it on our social media channels. So make sure you're following all those. Syracuse Orange Basketball on Twitter and SYR Football on Twitter, SYR Basketball on Twitter, the Facebook pages, all that. And we do put up a post on syracuse.com. So really easy to catch the replay in case you missed the show live. We'll be back on the football channel and YouTube Saturday night, which is all right for fighting, right? Shout out Elton John. Syracuse-Pittsburgh is a 3:30 kickoff, so we'll be here about 7-ish, 7:30-ish, whenever that game ends. We will be right here doing the thing. Your comments, instant reaction to Syracuse and Pittsburgh. Programming note, as noted, now we're not doing every basketball game during non-conference play, but we will be here Monday night doing a post-game show after the season opener, get some early thoughts going on basketball. So come on by. We're going to be here. It's getting crazy, friends. Thanks for watching Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health. My name is Brent Axe. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.